All right, good morning, everybody. All right, we're on lesson 16, starting with question number 3. We're talking about the worship being set in order, the Passover observed. And we were on question 3 as we get started this morning. Okay, question 3 here. We're talking about the offerings that were submitted here by the leaders of the tribes that were so happy, so glad, so grateful to be in the presence of God and the new tabernacle that is now standing in front of them, and the priests that are being consecrated so that they could worship their God. And so the question here is, what offerings were brought by the leaders for the dedication of the altar of burnt offerings? So what kinds of things were brought forward here by the leaders of the people? And it's interesting that these are the same offerings. Everybody brought the same offerings, each tribal leader, in the day that it was set for them. And we talked about how each one went by day in the order that of the actual movement of the tribes later on is going to be established. So what was one of the things that was, let's put it this way, what kinds of things were being brought?
So there's a silver platter full of flour, a silver bowl full of flour,
Okay.
spoon full of incense. There were various animals.
Okay. So all of these things, and we can kind of see them on the chart here. These were, in essence, all of the different things that were necessary to do all of the offerings for the people. Okay. So we remember at each time as each group of people were coming before God to establish this relationship, there was always that sequence of offerings that went through that process. And so the process is the same for everybody. The offerings that they're bringing may differ from the standpoint of let's say the hierarchy. You know, the hierarchy, like the priests, for instance, you know, they had the biggest of the offerings. They got the bull, you know, and it went down from there as to what, you know, basically people could afford. So here you have the leaders are bringing for their tribes. So this is a kind of a high priority. So you're going to see these biggest of the animals, for instance, things like that, and the most costly of the things like the silver and the gold up here. So all of these again represent all those different processes. So again, what's the process that we needed to do to be able to go through? What was that grouping of offerings? Do you remember what the first one was? If you were out of your relationship with God and you were in sin, what was the first offering that needed to be brought?
Sin offering.
A sin offering. Okay, so they got the big animal in there, and that goes through that, and you can see that up here, the male goat. Okay, so then now you've taken care of the sin, so you've purified, you've gotten that out of the way, but you want to reestablish that commitment and dedication to that relationship. And what kind of offering was brought to do that?
Burnt offering.
The burnt offering. Exactly. Okay, so you can see that up here, and that's the one young bull, the one ram, the one lamb of 1 year old. Okay, you see all that. So the relationship, now you've recommitted yourself to the relationship and the dedication to that relationship. And so what kind of offering then is brought to bring out the idea of, I'm grateful for the relationship, I'm glad I'm in this relationship, I thank you, God, for being my God. What kind of offering was brought out for that
A peace offering.
A peace offering, right. Okay, so here we are, and now we have the continue. And you see up here, the peace offering for the sacrifice, 2 oxen, 5 rams, 5 male goats, 5 lambs a year old. And then what always went along with the burnt offering? And up here it's coming in gold and silver plates. The grain offerings are out there. So those offerings that went along with that, and you see the big silver plate, the half the size of it silver plate, and all of those were the flour was fine flour was mixed with oil, and then you had the golden dish for the incense. Where was the incense going to go?
On the altar.
So, yeah, sometimes it went in with the mixed with the flour, burnt on the burnt altar. Okay, for burnt offerings. Sometimes it went into it's the same incense, but sometimes it went into the altar of incense also. But in this case, the incense is going into the burnt offering because this is all going up to God. Boof. And again, it's a thanksgiving for the altar. So this altar is going to be important, isn't it? The burnt offerings altar, is that going to be, that's probably going to be the busiest place in the tabernacle that's there, inside of the tented area there. Okay, very good. If you see, we're doing a lot of repetition on the offerings. It's for a very good reason. When you get out of here, if you don't remember anything else, you're going to remember that sequence in the offerings, and it won't be a mystery to you anymore. So that'll be good. All right, question 4. What other dedication was going on during these days of days 1 through 7? Remember, we all started day 1. What were the 3 big events that were going on day 1 so far?
Putting up the tabernacle.
Built the tabernacle, right? And then what?
Consecration of the priest.
Consecration of the priest, okay. So we got the place of worship, the means of worship in place. We've had now all the people from all the tribes now have come in. All the people who are going to be worshiping now have been taken, and are now taken care of. So this concert, all this is happening on this at the same time that the priests are getting consecrated. Now there's so let's do that right there. So there are those guys. Now the second question here is, who performed the priestly duties? Who performed the priestly duties for the dedication of the altar of offering? So you see, at the same time that the priests are being consecrated, it was an 8-day process. Days 1 through 7, Moses is acting as the priest, right, for Aaron and his sons, bringing the offerings, then they're laying their hands on. Same process every day. At the same time, every day, starting with the tribe of Judah, you have people bringing those offerings from the day that we saw on the previous slide. They're also bringing those, and the first day, there goes Judah in. And then the second day of the 7 days, the next tribe comes in, then the next tribe, then the next tribe. So that is going on each day up until day 8. And then the question is, who performed the priestly duties on the dedication of the altar offerings on the first 7 days, if the priests weren't consecrated yet, if Aaron and his sons weren't consecrated? So Moses had that role, that's right. And then on day 8, for the first time, Aaron and his sons now pick up those duties. And so now on day 8, when the 8th tribe comes in, that leader comes in and brings the offerings that were on that slide for that tribe. Now Aaron is the one. So this shows the turnover now from the old law, in essence the patriarchal law, because that's what they've been living under, right? And now the institution in its full of the Mosaic law. Now everything's in place. And of course, through as you go through days 1 through 7, there's Moses, and day 8 and onward, you have now Aaron and is doing it for the people. And so, at the conclusion of the 12th day, you have In fact, everything is in place for the law of Moses to now operate. Okay? Now, everybody with us on that? Trying to put you in the place of the people of Israel who are encamped around the tabernacle. They're watching all this happen right now for the first time. Okay? So, question 5. What did Aaron and his sons do before offering up any of the sacrifices for the people? Okay, so remember, now Aaron and his sons are picking up the duties, okay? So what is it, and if you go over to Leviticus chapter 9 and verse 7.
Sacrifice themselves.
Okay, so now for the first time we're seeing that process in place, where the priest is going to, now what special day, we're going to get into this at about a week, what special day of the year is this going to be an example of, that it's going to be the actions that Aaron takes here? The Day of Atonement, yeah. And this is going to start that process. Before Aaron goes into speak to God from now on, okay, into the Holy of Holies through the veil, okay, he gets to do that once. He's going to get to do that once a year. And it's going to be on the Day of Atonement. And so this is showing, this is kind of instituting that for the first time, showing how that process is in place there. So, there we go. The sin and burnt offerings for themselves are going to have to be done before they do any of the priestly duties. So, there's not going to be a lot of activity behind the veil for Aaron and his, to be able to do that as the high priest. It's just the Day of Atonement. But outside of the veil, there's a whole bunch of activities that are going to get done, and we're going to be talking about those. And again, think of them from those activities from the standpoint of they are a type of something that is going on in the New Testament with the church. Okay, so as you study through that, think about, what is this like? What is this like? And as you go through each of those sections. So here you have Aaron in this particular case. The type certainly would be if you're going to be speaking with God and you're going to be needing to have that relationship. That's also a type that we're going to talk about a little bit later. But again, keep that in mind. So the second part of the question: what did Aaron and Moses do after completing the sacrifices to the people? So, was this a joyous time?
You would think so, yeah.
Yeah, right. They couldn't be any more in sync with God than they were at this exact moment, okay? After getting all that done. Think about the joy that each of us have experienced having our sins washed away and being adopted as a child of God. Think about that, if you can all remember back to that period of time in your life when that happened to you and what that felt like, okay? That feeling was there for a reason. It wasn't a miraculous thing that was going on. It was that comfort of the soul, that peace that goes beyond understanding of the idea that your sins are gone. You are never going to be in a better position in your relationship with God in your whole life than right there at that point in time. And then, of course, you start your journey, and then you grow from there, and it gets better and better. But prior to that, I mean, that's a real climax point. So what was it that these guys were going through here? What are some of the things that Aaron and Moses did at this point? And if you look at Leviticus 9, verses 22 and 23.
They blessed the people, right?
Okay, so Aaron, acting as the priest, he raised his hands, blessed the people, And then he stepped down, made the offering, the sin offering. And then in verse 23, it says both Moses and Aaron went into the tent of meeting at that time. And when they came out, they blessed the people. And then the glory of the Lord appeared to the people. And we find from the other reading, what was the thing that happened at that point? Francis?
The glow.
What was that?
The glow.
No, they didn't, not the glow, but the presence of God, the glory of God, entered the tabernacle, and it was such a display that not even Moses could go back in from that point on. So it was the turnover, the changeover from Moses to Aaron was complete at that point. Okay, Moses didn't have to fulfill that role anymore. It was Aaron and his sons that were now going to do that within the Mosaic system. Okay, Moses is still a leader of the people. He's doing, but he has contributed significantly to getting this started. So if you had to think of somebody who would have gotten a major covenant started, and as a result of finishing the work that they needed to do, who might Moses have been a type for? For Christ. Yes, exactly. Yes, and so you can see, again, God using the same system so that we could learn from this, and it would be a tutor to help us understand what's going on in the New Testament. Okay, so this is all the stuff that they did. Moses and Aaron finally came out of the tent of meeting, blessed it, and then God got to work and getting in there. Okay, so the next question, how did God demonstrate his satisfaction with the work that was accomplished by the priests? And so this is what we were just talking about. And can you imagine what this looked like? Leviticus 9:24. Who wants to read that for me? Leviticus 9:24. Go ahead, Francis.
And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces.
Whoa. I kind of get the picture of, remember Elijah with the prophets of Baal and all that, and the water. And I mean, this had to be spectacular. I mean, just amazing. And so it was so amazing that they just never messed up after that, right? No, it just goes to show emotions are short-lived. In this case, like lighting a match to a piece of paper, it didn't have a lot. But let's not feel too bad for these guys, all right? Remember, these are babies. These are little babies. They were just born spiritually into this new system. So, we have to understand that. And God understood it. And so he's still going to be a good parent. And there's going to be a rod and there's going to be a carrot as we go along with this. So, question 7. Why did Nadab and Abihu die? Leviticus chapter 10, verses 1 through 3. Why did they die?
Strange fire.
They offered a strange fire before the Lord. And what made it strange? He didn't command it. Yeah, he didn't command it. And so, again, a simple lesson, but a very powerful lesson there. So the second part of the question was, who was allowed and not allowed to mourn their death, and why? Who was allowed to mourn their death?
The people.
The people, okay. Who else besides the whole congregation, specifically, who was allowed to mourn?
His family, or I guess they would all be included, but kinsmen?
Yeah, the Levites, basically. Everybody except for, and again, the not allowed to mourn part here was who? Aaron and the other two sons were not allowed to mourn for it. And what were they forbidden to do? What's that?
Take care of their clothes.
Yeah, ripping their clothes, uncovering their heads, basically. And the reason is there are consequences for disobeying God. And in the scriptures here, as we read that and we look at what it is in 6 and 7, what would have happened if, in fact, Aaron and his other sons had broken this part and had, in fact, mourned?
Not only they would die, but who else would die?
All of the people. So they had not only the responsibility for themselves, and sometimes, again, there's nothing more devastating than the death of a child to a parent. There's just nothing more devastating than that. And yet, the responsibility that they had goes beyond, way beyond that individual situation in there. Go ahead, Sam.
6, that Moses tells Aaron and his remaining sons, do not do this, so that you will not die and that he will not become wrathful against all the congregation. So I see the threat, or the promise rather, that Aaron and his sons will die. But what makes you say that God's wrath against all the congregation will be him killing all of them instead of some other punishment? Like, we see other examples of God's wrath being displayed through other...
Right.
The question is, where will God's anger result? It results in a separation from God. And what's the definition of death? It's a separation, right? So it's a spiritual... Remember, in the time here now, again, these are little spiritual children. The Nadab and Abihu put some strange fire on there. They died. God's wrath is being laid out, either black or white, right or left, dead or alive. And so this is the lesson that's being taught right here. So it doesn't specifically say that as a result of God's wrath falling upon these people, they're going to die. But in fact, isn't that the result? Spiritual death is death. Separation from God is, in fact, God. And we're going to see that in a lot of examples as we get into the clean and unclean, where the person is asked, you've got leprosy, you're unclean, you have to leave the camp. You have to be separated from the camp, maybe forever. And that's the example. Again, we have the type, the antitype kind of thing that's going on here. So yeah, exactly. It doesn't say that specifically, but in this case, you would want to see what the end result would be, and that would be the lesson that we want them to get to it. Leviticus 10 and verse 3, Moses said to Aaron, "It is," and this is heartbreaking right here. Again, if you're a parent that has lost a child, you can remember what that felt like. And here Moses saying to Aaron, "It is what the Lord spoke, saying, by those who come near me, I will be treated as holy, and before all the people I will be honored." And so Aaron therefore kept silent. That's powerful. That's powerful. Question 8. How does the depiction of the effects of wine and strong drink in Leviticus 10 verses 9 and 11 help us to understand God's feelings about alcohol and the consumption of this by his people? Let's read Leviticus 10 verses 9 through 11. Who would like to read that for us? Ken, go ahead.
It says, "Do not drink wine or intoxicating drink, you nor your sons with you, when you go into the tabernacle of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations, that you may distinguish between holy and unholy, and between unclean and clean, and that you may teach the children of Israel all the statutes which the Lord has spoken to them by the hand of Moses.
Okay, so
Let's take a look at that. Why were the priests not allowed alcoholic drinks? What were the two specific things that God's mentioning here that are very powerful tools for us to use when we're tackling this topic? Ken, go ahead.
Becomes impaired.
okay. How's that represented here?
In what, let's say verse 10 there.
Making a distinction between what is holy and profane and the clean and unclean.
Whoa! Okay, well, how important is that to be able to be of a state of mind where you can discern and make a distinction between that which is right and wrong, clean, unclean, profane, holy? Isn't that what life is based on? If you're going to be wise, you need to be able to do that. Are we supposed to be wise? Yes. Were the priests supposed to be wise? After all, they're the ones that are actually carrying out the worship here, right? And the priests are a type for something in the New Testament, somebody in the New Testament. Who would that be? Us! So, would it be important for us to be able to discern, as Christians, the profane from the holy? Yes, a whole lifetime of that. All right, so that's one thing is to make that distinction. What's the second thing? Verse 11.
I'm going to teach the people God's will.
So you can teach the people God's will. Yeah. How would being inebriated and how would that hurt your ability to teach people God's will? Slurred speech would be, yeah. Francis?
Main thing would be, it's like we studied in the Romans that we're studying on Wednesday night. You're teaching them to be holy and not to do this, but yet you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the power of influence, the power of example. Just do as I say, not as I'm doing over here. I know I know I'm drunk, but but you shouldn't do that, kid. Whatever. That's just not going to hack it, is it? No. So again, that's something that is powerful in there. All right, so let's go on to question 9. When was the Passover observed? Numbers chapter 9 and verse 5.
On the 14th day of the first month at twilight, in the wilderness of Sinai.
All right.
So when the 12th tribe brings its offering, what day of the first month are we in? When the 12th tribe brings their offering, what day of the first month are we in?
I guess it'd be the 12th.
12th day. That's right. So when's the Passover? On the 14th day. Okay. So two days later, they're going to observe for the first time. Since when is the Passover going to be observed?
Since leaving Egypt.
Since leaving Egypt.
2 years ago, on the exact same day, right? Isn't the day of the Passover the same day that they came out of? Okay, so you've got, again, the lineup of as you're going down through here. All right, so yeah. So the Passover is established on the 14th day there. Okay, and we're now... If you were unclean at the time of the Passover, when was the alternate time? The second month. That's an easy one. Second month, 14th day at twilight. So everybody's taken care of. All right, so that's number 16, lesson 16. We're going on now to lesson 17, and we're going to be talking about now as we look at at these different sacrifices and things that are going to be doing, and getting into now the daily life of the people. Okay, we're going to be looking at clean and unclean, and this was a big deal. So, as we get into it, question 1: God, from the beginning of creation, desired to be among His people from the very beginning, right? And so why did God establish laws concerning cleanness and uncleanness for the children of Israel? And the answer can be found over there in the 11th chapter of Leviticus, 44 and 45. Why did God establish these laws?
Based on His own character, His own intrinsic qualities of deity, that He's holy, so He required and demanded holiness of His people. We see it Old Testament, we see it New Testament.
Okay, so he mandates that the people be like Him, so that He can be with the people. Does that make sense? God's not wishy-washy. There's no gray area with Him. So He's holy, and He wants to be with us. But we're not holy. So how does God get to be with us? God changes, right? Oh, God doesn't change? No, same God. No, same God. That's right. We have to change. That's what repentance is all about when we're talking about, as we throw in a New Testament word right there in concept. But is it really a New Testament concept, this repentance? Changing your heart, going in a different direction, going in the direction God goes in. That's not the word's a New Testament word, but it's not a New Testament concept. It's a concept that's been there all along. God wanted to be with His people. And He couldn't be with His people if they were not clean, if they were not holy, because God is holy. So that just makes sense, right? Okay, so the next question then, how would their uncleanness defile this thing which we just set up for worshiping God? The tabernacle. How would their uncleanness defile the tabernacle? Leviticus chapter 15, verse 31. Say it.
Well, they're just making it a place where God, by His nature, shouldn't be. Like if God's supposed to be in a holy place, for He is holy, and they bring their uncleanness in, and it's no longer a place that's suitable for Him.
Right. And what would God's response be to that? He's going to die. God's wrath would come into play, right? And His judgment, and at this point, the result would be, death is what would happen in that particular case, like happened with Nadab and Abihu. They brought unholy, profane, strange fire, tried to put it in the burner of incense, and God wasn't having it. And so something had to give, and the thing that gave was their lives. And God separated Himself from them, and that was it, because He had to remain that way. So that which is holy cannot mix with that which is unholy. The penalty is separation or death. And again, when I'm using the term separation, I'm using death. I hope you're seeing that what we're talking about here is the type is the physical death. The antitype is the spiritual death. Okay, you see, we need to see that, because every time we talk about death or separation, it's in that respect that we're talking about it. Uncleanness is basically defying, later on it's going to defile the temple, but the tabernacle specifically. When they bring unholiness into a place that is holy, then that's a cause of a problem. Okay? So question 2, what did God consider to be the greatest defilement that His people could suffer? And I went over to Ezekiel chapter 18. Let's go over there for a second, and let's get somebody to read that. Ezekiel 18 and verse 4. And when you have it, raise your hand and... Okay, go ahead, Clarissa.
Ezekiel 18 and verse 4.
Behold, all souls are mine. The soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son is mine. The soul who sins shall die.
Okay,
So what did God consider the greatest defilement of his people?
Sin.
sin.
Yes. Sin. Physical, type for spiritual. Lower, higher. Okay. So sin is committed here, but it is the spiritual part, that aspect of it, the higher aspect, that is the primary concern. So again, focus, see the physical, focus on the spiritual as we go through here. So sin separates God and his people. It leads to spiritual death. Let's take a look at a few other verses to take a little wider context on this. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. Get somebody to read that one. Proverbs 4:23. And raise your hand if you get it. Go ahead, Brent.
Keep your heart with all vigilance, and from it flow the springs of life.
Okay.
Watch your heart. Okay, guard your heart. What are we talking about when we're talking about heart? That's right. Jesse's pointing right there. Yeah, it's who you are. Your conscience, your mind, your all of your being. That's that. Okay, so let's look at the next one. Romans 8 verse 7. Guard your heart there. Romans 8 and verse 7. Who's got that one? Sam, go ahead.
Because the mind set on the flesh is hostile toward God, for it does not subject itself to the law of God, for it is not even able to do so.
Okay.
So we're supposed to guard our heart, but when we look at our mind, okay, you've got this war going on. And there's a fight for who's going to own the heart, who's going to control it, which direction's it going, okay? So the worldly mind is at war with God's law. The fleshly at war with the spiritual, okay? All right, let's go to Jeremiah 17 and verse 9. How tough is this heart thing to gain control of? Jeremiah 17 and verse 9. Who's got that? Jesse, go ahead.
The heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it?
Wow. Almost sounds uncontrollable, doesn't it?
Deceitful. Why? How could the heart be deceitful? Again, if the heart is your being, your conscience, how can it be deceitful? Does it make up its own mind? How does the heart operate? How does your mind operate? How do you make decisions on things?
2.
Okay, go ahead.
I, the Lord, search the heart, I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings. So a Calvinist,
doings, yeah.
a Calvinist verse 9 and say, well, we're just corrupt or depraved, we're born that way, can't do anything about it. But the very next verse gives it more commentary explanation. No, that's me doing it, or you doing it, or whoever doing it. He's going to test it, but it's our doings, our ways.
So it's our ways we're the ones that train it, right? We're the ones that make the decisions as to what goes into it. Building blocks. We're the ones that decide which blocks we're going to insert into the wall, into the foundation. So that thing which we are building can help us to make good decisions. Okay? And so, yeah, it can be trained. The heart is deceitful because we trust it. We think, oh, yeah, I did all of it. I got all this training. Oh, it's not going to let me down. And then all of a sudden we get in a situation and out comes that word out of your mouth that you didn't expect was going to just pop out there all of a sudden. And where'd that come from? Well, somewhere back there, you got a brick, and that brick got stuck in the wall, and it's now who you are. And so those decisions get made through there. So it can be deceitful, which means that we have to keep a close eye on it, right? Yeah. And let's go one more. Proverbs 22 and verse 6. The most tender and precious thing that we have to influence in this life is talked about right here. Proverbs 22:6. Who's got that? Go ahead, Ken.
A child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
Okay, so here we go. Here's this idea that we have in the heart is something where it's where everything comes from. Jesus talks about this in Mark chapter 7 and verses 14 through 23, and we won't read all that because you're very familiar with this one. In essence, what is Jesus saying here in Mark 7 verses 14 through 23?
Man come from within a man, his heart.
Yep, not the things that go in. So we're talking about, and this is where we're going to be leaving off for next week. In this particular one, we're going to start with question 3, okay? But the idea is that it's out of the heart that all the decisions and everything are made, and so as a result of that, these things that were designated as clean and unclean and everything, were they really clean and unclean as far as dirty or whatever? Think about that. Nah, I mean, is that really what it's all about? Well, we're going to talk about Peter and an experience that he has in the book of Acts next week also. But think about that. Clean and unclean. Are we really talking about dirty, or are we talking about the heart? Okay, so we're going to start with question 3 next week. And right there, what's the primary purpose of the laws of cleanness? And I hope that's a word, cleanness. I started to use cleanliness and went, no, it's not. It's not really cleanliness. It is about clean and unclean. So cleanness and uncleanness. Like it, love it. All right, thanks you guys. You were great.